Hello, everyone, and welcome to Advocate for Me podcast. I'm excited. You guys know I get really, really excited like a cheerleader, flipping upside down and stuff about when I have a guest on the show. And I'm really excited about this guest because this is my sister. When I tell you, God order steps and bring people into your life, he really does. Michelle and I met. I was hosting the Autism Moms Night Out, and I was looking for a keynote speaker. And I had contacted this agency because I thought of the person to come, their leader to come to be the keynote speaker, and they was like, "Oh, they're not able to make it, but we know someone who's an advocate and who will be really good coming to speak, for the moms." And so they said her name is Michele Abraham-Montgomery. And I said, okay, I would love to meet her. And when I tell you from day one, um, we have, God has just like put us together, and she is such a wealth of information as a mom, as a wife, as a leader in the community. And so I'm so excited to have her on the podcast tonight. So, for no further ado, I want to present to some of you Michele Abram Montgomery. Hello.
So much for having me this evening, and thank you for the beautiful introduction. It just definitely made my heart smile, and I appreciate you so much in the amazing work, I should say awesome, right, that you are doing.
Thank you. Look, I have a terrific mentor named Michelle.
Awesome. I'll take it.
Yeah,
I'll
yeah.
take it.
Yes. So, Michelle, tell the audience, who is Michele Abram Montgomery?
Oh my goodness. Wow. To be honest, I am finding Michele Abraham Montgomery every day. Finding who is Michele Abraham Montgomery every day. So I recently turned 50, and it opened up a whole new door for me becoming 50. I just found new peace and a new energy, new revelation and resiliency in myself. I was ready to actually pass the baton, and it was very interesting because new doors opened up,
Mm.
new opportunities became available, and I was like, well, wait a minute, God, are you saying that there's still more work for me to do? And I'm finding, I believe that there is. So I wow, I would say that, to be honest, when I first found Michele Abraham, before the Montgomery, Michele Abraham was a very broken person, all over the place. Um, but as my journey began, and I found out that when I had my son, who I thought, because all of my life I felt unloved, unwanted, undesired, and I lived a very reckless life. But I finally found like I have someone who is going to love me unconditionally. And that was interesting because I realized that babies don't love you. They are very demanding, very
Yeah.
selfish, and they want a lot. And I was like, oh my goodness, what is happening here? But I was so ready for my son. My son, he gave me all of these gifts I should say, I became aware of
Mhm.
them. God gave me the gifts, but I became aware of them through pregnancy. So many things that I had never done before, didn't know that I could do, had became into existence. I could draw, and I had never drawn anything before, but anything that I looked at, I could just pick up a pencil and draw, and it was amazing. And these gifts that I had during my pregnancy was amazing. And just as amazing as they were when they came during the pregnancy, when he left, he took them with him. So I cannot draw a lick
Oh
anymore.
my
And I had drew all of these Disney characters. His room, the nursery was beautiful, full of Disney characters and all different type of characters, and with his name on it and everything. And I could not draw a lick after I had him. And so I started, doing different things and embracing motherhood, embracing um feeling like, someone needed me, and I liked it. And so later, in my journey, I had found out that my son, there was some stuff going on with him, that he wasn't developing properly. And so I, I just could feel it, and I tell parents, to trust that maternal instinct, because I kept going to the doctors, and the doctors kept telling me, no, boys are slower than girls, and he's okay, he'll be okay. And I just knew, like they say, that
god.
and but I was like, okay. And so I just kept going along with it, knowing that, there was this uneasiness I had about what was going on with my son. But when things were happening, and I'm like trying to find help or trying to find people to talk to, trying to find a support group, and I couldn't find one nowhere. I'm from Southwest Philadelphia, and not only were there no support groups for uh young mothers, there were no, that I knew of or could find. But when I did find one, they were people that didn't look like me, didn't even
Mhm.
speak my language, and they opened the door for me, and they allowed me to come in to their group. And I learned state and federal laws for children with special needs, and it changed my life, because before that situation, I didn't realize that I was prejudiced. I had a lot of biases about people and about the way people did things, people looked, and how they act. And it wasn't until then that it really made me aware of how prejudiced I was of different people and about situations. And it really opened my eyes. And so, they say things happen, for a reason. And
Mhm.
it was so many barriers that I have. And even though I had started by saying I was broken, that these pieces that I had, they were all injured and all wounded in these broken pieces. And it was like my life the pieces started coming together, started to fit, and I started figuring out who I was. I figured out my purpose at that time. And I'm so thankful and grateful, because there are so many people who are existing in this world for years and years and years and do not know what their purpose is, walking around and have no clue what they're supposed to do or why they're supposed to do it. And they're just going through life every day, coexisting and doing different things, and have no reason for why, or having a job that doesn't have any substance and that won't bring any type of change into their life or other people's, other than the fact that they're doing what they're doing in that position. And if that position discontinues or someone decides that they no longer want them, then it's over and they're over. And now they go back to what? That big question mark. And so that big question mark in my life now had a definition. And it was like, okay, I know that I am supposed to be here to help not just myself, but other people, to bring some type of change and bring supports and resource, help people find out what they're supposed to do or connect them to where they're supposed to go and who they're supposed to be with and give them direction. And so, it's interesting because I think, like, okay, so Moses, it took him 40 years that they wandered around in the
Mm,
wilderness. And I feel like I kind of like, started doing it myself in my life. And I always asked, like, God, why was my journey so hard? Why was it that it seemed like I had to always have the worst case scenario when it came down to anything that I ever had to go through? And I just felt like God was saying that, people don't want sympathy, that they connect with empathy, with people
mhm,
who know how they feel and people who have walked in their shoes or that have an appreciation for what they're going for. I mean, going through. And it was like, wow. And I feel like, okay, so when I talk to people, it's not that I'm just telling them what I read or what I watched or what I think, but, it's like every job that I pretty much had put me in line for where I am right now today, starting off in comprehensive daycare, straight out of high school, working for the school district of Philadelphia and starting to understand about uh, developmental uh, growth and with children, and then working with youth, and then going on to work with high fidelity wraparound and learning about you youth and adult mental health, and then like with the advocacy and with coming into like working in an organization to provide just supports for a family. And so I feel like, I'm still I'm still trying to make sure that my clay is still moist, that I'm still
mm,
moldable, that God can still come in and make me who he needs me to be when he needs me to be that. And a lot of time, like we get to a certain age and it's like our that clay becomes hardened and then it's like, oh yeah, I'm set in my way, or I'm gonna do this and I'm gonna do that. And right before I had turned 50, at 49, I was like, okay, it's time to pass the baton to the younger generation and let them do some things. And you know it was like, no, the clay is still moist, it's still time to mold you. And that's when I had got the position working with children hospital. I did a fellowship, and I became a sleep navigator. And it was like super crazy because I had just got diagnosed with sleep apnea myself, knew nothing about sleep journeys, sleep psychoeducation. But I wanted to, and so I was doing my fellowship at CHOP in the Lynn Fellowship, which was also a blessing. Um, and so I had told my mentor that I wanted to learn more about it. And she says, oh, there's an opening in the sleep clinic. And I'm like, yeah, but I don't know sleep. And she's like, but you're excellent with families. And I took and applied for the position and got it. And I'm like, God, like, what is happening now? And so I was like, okay, my foundation was always stayed the same, which was families. But now I had a new branch on my tree, which was sleep. And it's like, Wow. And so, like, even now, I'm just growing new branches on my tree every day. And I like to think of myself as a tree, that God is always watering because I keep having these new branches that's growing out. Um, every time I turn around, and I just like say, okay, here I am, use me, and try to keep that willing spirit that when different opportunities and new things come available to say, okay, I'm there. Like what I always say, if there's a seat at the table, I'm going to sit in it.
Mhm.
And if there's a
Yeah.
spot there, I'll bring my own chair.
Yes. Excuse me, coming over.
Yes. Yes.
Yes. I'm loving the conversation just because I've known Michelle for a couple years now, and so when she talks about purpose, and both of us kind of like walked into our purpose because of our sons, whether it was with organizations, working in communities, helping families. Um we we were moms first. We were the mom hat first, but then we realized that other families were going through what we were going through, and so we both stepped into that role of walking into our purpose. And so when you have, I'm gonna say that calling, because even though we didn't know that we had it or we had that gift, it came with our sons and their diagnosis, and we just, God was like, okay, it's time. And it's
Yes.
like, it's exactly what you were saying. Like, I went to Albright College, and I went in there like, oh, I'm gonna be a teacher, educator. And so at Albright, they didn't have early childhood and elementary education as a major. It was a minor. So when I went in, they was like, well, what's your major? I was like, I don't know, I just want to be a teacher. So they was like, oh, child and family studies. And I was like, I don't want to take no child and family studies.
Mm-hmm.
And so now everything that I do is dealing with children and families.
Mm-hmm.
So when I say, when I say my prayers with my kids in the morning, I say, God, please order my steps, that it may be fulfilled with a purpose, and I may be one step closer to my destiny. Because like Michelle was saying, God has opened doors, and Michelle has opened doors for me. You guys heard her talk about the CHOP fellowship, the Lynn fellowship. And so when she talk about passing that baton, she's definitely a woman of her word. Like, she will pass it back to the next person so that they can experience and go through what she went through. And so I'll be finishing my Lynn fellowship at CHOP in June of 2023. And so this experience has been eye opening.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm glad that we say yes to different opportunities like that. Like, we don't shrink ourselves and say, well, and I'm not gonna lie, in the beginning I was like, y'all sure y'all want me?
Wow.
I was like, y'all sure me? Like, and they was like, yes, we want you. And I'm like, okay, like, all right, I'll do it. And so when you say yes to your purpose and yes to those opportunities, um it's definitely your like, I don't want to keep using the word purpose, but that's the only thing I can
Yes.
think of, like, is
Absolutely.
is
Absolutely.
walking you into your purpose. And you may be hesitant, and you may feel like, like, questioning him, like, are you sure it's for me and not for somebody else? And I talk to God like that all the time, like, you sure it's for me, like Levon, like, it's not another Levon. He was like, no, you. Like,
Wow.
I
And,
need
and that's
you.
that's so crazy because that was when I did Lynn. It was actually my second opportunity. I was offered it the first time. The first time I was offered it, I was working at Community Behavioral Health, and I was working in high fidelity wraparound as a family support partner. And they were flying me from state to state to work with families that had children in residential facilities that had mental health um, challenges. And at that time, I was like, wow, like I really liked flying. around from state to state, and I wasn't ready at that time. And I'm happy that I did decline. But during that time, I had learned so much because, we're so fast to say, oh, when you're on a plane, you have to first make sure before you can help anybody else that you put your oxygen mask on.
Mhm,
And I was,
mhm,
proponent of saying that. And I realized I was not doing it because my house was on fire. And
mhm,
as I was learning about mental health, a lot of things started resonating with me. And I was felt like I was looking in the mirror, like, wait, what's going on here? And, at first I said, oh, I saw that my daughter had identified because she had a lot of these negative diagnoses, the oppositional defiant disorder, mood disorders, and all of these disorders. And like, wow. But then I started, as I continued to learn, and I was like, well, wait, there's some things that I'm going through myself that I'm like, wait, yeah, that's what I do. That's how I
mhm,
feel. And it opened up a whole new door for me to be able to identify and recognize my own mental health challenges and my own mental situation. And it was like, wow, because, you know, um, we weren't allowed to talk about, especially mental health. Like, wait a
mhm,
minute, what are you talking about? And what happened at home always stayed at home. You didn't talk to anybody. You didn't get any type of go see a therapist. Absolutely not. You better not go out and tell nobody what is happening at home or what you're doing it. Or if anything is happening, you write it down on a piece of paper or you eat it or you burn it. And you forget
mhm,
about it. And you move on, you suck it up. And that was life and you live with it. And so I was like, wow, there was so many things that I learned during my stay at my position with High Fidelity Wraparound that when I got the second opportunity to do lend, and it was like, okay, wow, like I'm not going to say no twice. And
mhm,
I
mhm,
had to make a decision because at that time I was working for the school district, and basically the school district was saying, no, you can't do it. And that night, because I told Lynn, let me, to Lynn, um, I said, let me think about it and I'll get back to you. And it was crazy because I don't know, I couldn't sleep that night. I was up, but I always had sleep apnea. So I had insomnia and I was always up. And I was watching, I should say, yeah, the motivational um, interviews and things. And there was one that came on Steve Harvey I did on YouTube, and it was called Jump, and he was
yes,
talking about just jumping, and I
mhm,
was like, wow, it's time. And we hold on to things and we think that that is our security when it's really time to jump. It's really time to move on, go to the next level. Like, how can you get to the next level if you don't leave off the one underneath of it? And we get so comfortable on that level that when it's time to go to the next step, we're afraid. And
mhm,
so it was like with Lind, when I had the opportunity and the school just said, no, you can't do it. Maybe you can do it again next year. And I felt like, wait a minute. I'm not a child. Like, you're not going to tell me what I can and cannot do. And then I'm
mhm,
angry, but I was like, it's time to jump. And that gave me the motivation that I needed to let that go and go to the next level. And when I jumped, so many doors opened up for me because at that time, Spectrum Success 911 was just a support group. And because I had that affiliation with community behavioral health, twice a month I would have support groups because that was never available for me.
mhm,
And I had made a promise to God on my lowest, darkest day. God, if you help me figure this out, I promise that any parent that ever comes my way will never feel as hopeless and helpless as I do today. And I was sticking to that promise. So I started doing support groups. And when I did Lynn, what my final project was to turn my support group into a nonprofit organization, in which we did. And so with doing that and making that jump, it just propelled me to a whole nother level, opened up so many doors, and all of a sudden that was like new water that sprouted out so many new branches on my tree all at one time. It was like, oh my God, like what is happening? And it really actually like opened my heart, opened my life to a whole new level of spirituality, because I knew that God, you open these doors. I need you to help me if I'm going to walk through it, because I don't know where I am. And so, I had to trust that if God opened the door, that he was going to be the one to help me navigate through it. And that's so crazy, because these things that I'm saying, then I became a sleep navigator. And so these things like navigating, God is navigating me and I'm navigating people. And
Yeah.
so it's like when I'm working with families and they say, well, what is a navigator? And I'm like, a I am a co-discoverer with families within their journey, helping them figure out their voice, their choices, to make sure that they are heard, honored, and respected along their journey. And the same way the families were like in awe and just like mesmerized, I was the same way, like wiping off these smear glasses and seeing a whole new scene for the first time with the families. And then it became for the first time for me. And it's like when I feel like I work with families, and in the beginning I start off thinking, okay, I'm here to help you. But unbeknownst to me, they are helping me. And it's,
Mhm.
oh my goodness, you just like took me to a whole nother level that I didn't even know, working with these families. And it's just, and I talk about, reciprocity in 2023, pouring into the cups. They're pouring
Yeah.
into my cup, I'm pouring into theirs. It's amazing. And I'm just like loving my journey now.
Yes. Like I can definitely see it. So, I want you to talk a little bit more about, like, tell the audience about Spectrum Success 911, and then talk about the Autism Ambassadors program. Because I know that kind of like came out after you finished Lind as well. So if you
Sure.
could talk about those two things,
Okay.
and let the audience know about them and what their mission and statement is.
Yes, absolutely. So I wait, what was you saying? Tell them, oh,
Oh,
Spectrum
Spectrum Success
911.
911.
Yeah. So Spectrum Success 911, we started off as a support group for families that had children that were on the spectrum. And that was because of when I did find out that my son had autism, I again didn't know what that was, what autism was. And it was crazy because I did write a blog about it, and I at the time was going to Devereaux. That's where I got my diagnosis from. And I remember, we went in the room, and it was like when they said your son has autism, and I felt like the characters on Charlie Brown when the adults were talking and it sounded like wom 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 wom
Mm,
wom wom wom, and everything that they said after that sounded like that. And I felt like I was in this bubble. And the thing is that being in the bubble, I wanted to stay in that bubble. Like, please, bubble, don't pop, because I was afraid of what was outside the bubble, even though I had no clue what was in the bubble with me either, because I had this word that I had no information about. And um, I didn't know anything. There was no books like now, and I think they give you like a lot of information when you get the diagnosis. But I had to figure it out. Like, what is autism? What does that mean? These new words just came, like neurological. What is that? Like, I've never used these words ever in my life. And now they're coming into my world, and I don't even know how to use them properly in a sentence. And so having to try to figure that out, navigate that, and then now how to figure it out, because they told me that my son, that Khylil, would never walk, never talk, never be able to use the bathroom by himself, that that I might as well just institutionalize him because he was not going to be productive in society. And
Mm.
the first thing I thought was the devil is a liar. I refuse to believe that because how could this amazing child who gave me, or when I had him, we coexisted together, shared these amazing gifts with me, and how now can you say that he is supposed to be so, he's not going to be productive, he's not going to be anything? I just couldn't believe that, and I couldn't believe, like, God, why would you allow me to have this child if there is nothing positive about this? And I just refuse to believe that. And that's when I just started going on this quest to find out what can I do to support my child, to help him to be the best version of him, whatever that was going to be and whatever that was going to look like. And so with that, that's how we or how Spectrum Success 911 started as a support group. And as after Lynn then turning it into a nonprofit organization, and then another door opened and I started writing these programs. And so the first program we ever did was Autistic Ambassadors. And Autistic Ambassadors was a program that we wrote, which is 6 weeks of programming for youth on the spectrum along with their siblings. And I thought that it was so important for the siblings to be incorporated because they are their first cheerleaders. They're with them all the time. And I looked at the relationship between my son and my daughter, and it was like I made her a co-caretaker of my son, whether she wanted to be or not. And it was like every time they would go somewhere, trying to make sure Khylil was okay, trying to watch her brother, even though she was the baby. And I changed the birthright and I changed everything. I put her in this situation, but I saw that with her, he thrived. She now was helping to guide them. And a lot of times in these relationships with siblings, the sibling is the one that makes sure they're okay, make sure everything's there. When the parent is absent, they step right in the line and now they become the protector. They are the ones that are guiding and navigating the path for them. And so it only makes sense to keep them with them. And while the individual is learning self efficacy and advocacy, why are we not giving that sibling self efficacy to be able and be proud that they have a loved one that has a diagnosis, and advocate how to advocate for them using strength based language where they can be proud of their sibling and what is going on in their situation? And so that had to happen for autistic ambassadors for them to thrive. I felt as though that was just necessary. And so they come in with them for the 6 weeks of programming. And we did it as a pod. And it was crazy because I was at I was on a webinar and there was Work Ready was there and some other organizations, and Work Ready was talking about the summer programming for youth to get paid. And I said, well, do you do program, do you have Work Ready for individuals with a diagnosis? And I said, could you do it or would you do it? And they said, well, it's not that we wouldn't do it, but we won't write a curriculum for them. And I said, well, if I create a curriculum for them, will you provide the funding? And they said, if you do it, then we will. And I have 45 days in which to create a program for autistic ambassadors, and I did it, and they funded it and they got paid for that 6 week of programming, and said that our program was the best program out of the programs. Our children were so mannerable, they were so what do you call it, like mannerable, and they just did everything they were supposed to do. They weren't out of control, and they were saying like our program was the best program, and they offered us to do it again. And so this year we'll do it, and we have double the amount of participants that we had from last year. And so I am so excited because we're bringing in a autism organization to come in to support with the youth that are on the spectrum, to help with the behaviors and to help them to learn how to identify their triggers and how to self de-escalate and just to manage that. So because they're getting paid, they're going to learn financial literacy. They're going to learn the difference between a credit card and a debit card, and how to write checks, how to go into a bank, and how to withdraw money, how to use a ATM machine safely and successfully, how to go to a store and do community engagement safely and successfully without having a meltdown. And so those are just some of the different proponents of the programming that they will be doing. But even for the sibling, there's a whole different piece for them to be able to identify and come into, like, who am I and what am I supposed to do, and that I am individual from my sibling, and start to navigate who they are and what they want to do, and start picking out, like, their choice of what they want to do in life. And so I'm just so excited about how we're doing the program this year, expanding it and just allowing them to be separate and come together at the same time. I just feel like I know it's going to be a beautiful program.
Yes, I'm excited. I think I told you this when I saw you on Monday at Lynn. I did the Tyre's Village Autism Walk.
Hmm.
And so we were walking around the track, and me and the grandmother that was participating in the walk, we just so happened partnered up, was walking together. And so we're walking and we're talking, and she's talking about her grandson, not her grandson, her son, um, that's adopted, and she mentioned that he was in the program, the autistic ambassadors. And I was
Yes.
like, oh, and she was like, and it's with Michelle. I was like, yeah, that's my friend, that's my sister. And I was like, oh, okay.
Wow.
And she was like, yeah, he's going. She was like, I gotta fill out the paperwork, but yes, he's going. He's going to go back this year. She was like, he loved the program, and she was
Wow.
just giving you all these flowers, and I was just walking with her, just smiling, like I was like,
Wow.
me talk, and I was like, I just love the fact that you're doing this. um Especially now where our kids are out here, and unfortunately they're getting shot, and the violence and the fighting and all that stuff that's taking place here in Philadelphia. Like, we still have people that's out here that's helping our kids and empowering our kids. Like, you're teaching them how to write a check. I have to teach my son right now how to sign the back of a check
Yes.
because he was looking at me like, what is this, like, sign? Like, we're at the bank and we opened
Wow.
up his account, and he was like, I don't know how to sign this back, like, this check. I'm like, oh my
Wow.
goodness, okay, learn that in school. I was like, okay, so we got to go back. I was like, and we have to learn how to do that. And so you're empowering these kids to go into their community and their environment and be part of it. And if you want to talk about inclusion and inclusive, like, that's it right there. You're not teaching them to go and just be in a room by themselves and they just hanging out. Like, you're giving them gifts and opportunities so that when they leave from this program, they're still able to live and do what they need to do for themselves, for their families, and for everyone. Like, what you're teaching them, they're gonna remember for the rest of their lives. And so, I love the
Yes.
program. When
Yes.
when you told me about it, I was just like, yeah. Like, remember, I was screaming, I'm like, yes, yes,
Awesome. And the one thing
yes.
is that sets Spectrum Success 911 apart from other organizations is that we provide a holistic approach. Like, when you find out that your child has autism, you start taking the child to services, only the child. We provide services to the entire family. So last December, I was able to successfully complete and get my certification as a family peer support specialist supervisor now. So just knowing the being a peer support partner and being able to talk with the families and coach, not only just individuals, not just the individuals, but also the families, and coaching them and helping them to not just understand about the individual, but understand their position in the family and understand how the family comes together and leaving the door open for those that aren't there yet. And I think that's the greatest piece, because usually when we do our coaching, we start with a segment called the elephant in the room, and that's having those challenging conversations after the diagnosis. And a lot of times, a lot we get the diagnosis and we just say, okay, well, our child has this or that and so forth, and we just keep going, never knowing what this, that, and so forth is, or how it's going to affect us, never asking anybody else in the room, like, how did you feel when you found out that Johnny had this? And so we sit down and we have these interactive activities that are so loving, to so that everybody knows how everybody feels, and being able to do it in a platform where there's no shaming, no blaming, no judging, being able to speak freely and being able to say, you know what, I'm not there yet. I can't accept it, because I think that a lot of times what we don't realize is that the stages of acceptance begins with rejection. So a lot of
Mhm.
times when things happen and people reject it and they get angry, like, of course, like somebody come and say to me, like, oh, we're gonna have to do this and that, and I don't want that. I'm like, no, I'm not doing that. I'm going to get a second opinion because I'm rejecting that has to be done. And with a rejection, then the next step, maybe, hopefully, then they can accept it. And if, you can get to that sweet spot, then you can embrace it. But when families come together and somebody rejects it, it's okay. The same way with our mental health piece, I'm advocating to say it's okay to not be okay. How many times have you gone to work and was not having a good day? And you go up to your boss and say, I'm not having a good day today? So they can say, okay, then you need to go home. But we have to put on this mask and we have to pretend like we're okay even when we're not. So now, being able to walk in our truth and to be able to say, I am not having a good day today, and I'm not sure what I need to get to that place. I'm kind of figuring it out. But then for someone to lovingly say, okay, well, what do you need while you're at? How can I support you or help you until you can get to where you need to be? That's the love that we need, that I'm advocating for, trying to teach that strength based language, and so that we can coexist in harmony, opposed to everybody just always being angry, which is what is happening now. And
Mhm.
so, just trying to help families holistically figure out where they are, and then now accept that, and then figure out where they want to go and learn what they need to get there, and then support them with that journey.
And that's so powerful because, like you said, it's when a family receives a diagnosis, it's not just um the child receiving a diagnosis, it's everybody in that
That's
household,
right.
because now they have to. And I always tell families this, like, before you went into that doctor's appointment, like, you loved on your child, you was the advocate, and you was ready to, like, not ready, but you was doing what you needed to do in
Yep.
order to find out what was going on. And so then when you go in that room and they close the door and they give you the diagnosis, yes, you have a diagnosis on paper now, but that love and support and that advocacy and everything that you was given to that child before you went into that office now has to be 10x, because now you know what it is now. And that's just any diagnosis. And I'm just saying now on my point of view, because of my son's, with his is, the feeding tube being premature, ADHD. So as you know, his diagnosis, um it still was like a grieving piece for me, because now I was like, how I'm gonna work this out, um with my lifestyle, And now I have to, have all these doctors and specialists and therapy sessions. And, it does change your life. But at the same time, that love, support, and advocacy that you was giving that child before you walked in that office is the same thing that you need to give them when you hear that diagnosis. And I know for the both of us, that's what we did. And we pulled the community with us. Um, and not leaving that parent alone that needed the resources when we had the resources. Like we gave it to them. And we not just, here it is, write it on a piece of paper and just handed it to them. No, we took their hand and their family and walked them through the process.
Mhm.
And so that's why like our organizations is needed so much in the community, um, for families, because I've watched parents sit at the table and receive a diagnosis, and everybody else got up from the table and left her there. And
Mm.
I was sitting there, and I was like, did they just really leave her there? And
Yeah.
I was sitting at the table in a position of representing the child as their special instructor. And so that's why I started my business, because I was like, y'all just left her here, and like now, she loves on her child, but now she's trying to figure out what to do next.
Mhm.
And so that's why it's so important for Spectrum Success 911 to be in existence. And you talk about purpose, like that's it right there. Like it's so many people, so many families, so many children crying out for help.
Mhm.
And so like we put on that cape and we we go out there and do what we gotta do. And I just love the fact that we have like all these grassroots organizations that's being started because we seen a problem. And like you said before, when we started the podcast, like we get in that seat at the table. And if not, we're going to nicely, gently say, excuse me, can you move over a tad bit and bring our own chair and sit at the
Absolutely.
table with them,
Absolutely.
um, so that we can let them know what these concerns and challenges are,
Right.
for these families, so that we can make these changes so that everyone can be supported and that everyone can be inclusive and that everybody can do what they need to do for their families.
Wow.
And so
And
with, go ahead.
so 2 years ago, we brought in the mental health piece, and I didn't understand at that time, though, how it was going to just blow our organization,
Mhm,
to blow it up and just take it to the next level. And it was like, because at first it was just about autism, but most of the time we learned that with the diagnosis there are usually a dual diagnosis, and
mhm,
there is a mental piece that definitely couples that. And I didn't understand it in the beginning, but it just definitely made sense to be able to bring that mental health piece in there, for the families to be able to have that understanding, empowerment, knowledge. um and it was like, so for my daughter, I had two children, the son and the daughter, on opposite ends of the spectrum, because my son had autism and my daughter had the mental health, which is a whole different animals. And I would say, yeah, the ASD, I don't mind those letters, but the ODD and those other letters that are with the mental health piece, those were the letters I didn't like. And it was crazy because I gotta stop saying crazy. I'm sorry if I offended anybody by saying it. But when I had found out about her mental health, my mental health, and when I started to get in tune with the mental piece, and I started learning like trigger, like what's trigger? I never really knew about trigger, what was trigger. And I used to always, growing up as a young adult, saying, I'm traumatized, not even really understanding what that was at the time. Now that I know what trauma is, and to be traumatized, and I was using it correctly, but I didn't have a full scope of all the dynamics in that word, and what it meant and what it really looked like. And so um I tell parents, if I want to be honest, when my daughter at the time was exhibiting those behaviors before she learned how to navigate that ship, she was all over the place and her behavior was very explosive. And I, at the time, was taking it personal. I thought that she was acting out about because of me, or she didn't like me, and it had nothing to do with me. And at the time, I didn't know how to separate the behavior from the child. And
Mm,
when my daughter would kiss me back then, I used to wish like my skin could just roll off my face because I was so angry because of the behaviors that I was like, I just don't even want to be around you. But then when I became knowledgeable and the skills were removed from my eyes, and I started to understand about mental health and the disconnect and the pieces, and I had to learn how to disconnect the behavior from the child. And I had to say to my daughter, there is nothing that you can ever do that will ever stop me from loving you, because I'm going to love you unconditionally. And I share that with the parents and tell them that is the most powerful thing that they can do in the relationship between a parent and a child, is for a child to have security, to know that my parent is never going to stop loving me. Because the first thing when our children do something that we don't like or we feel is disobedient is we push them away, or we
mm,
pull back on love, and we don't show them love. Now we are stern with them, and it's like, you don't love me anymore. And that's what a child would think. You don't
mm,
anymore. And that's totally opposite of the approach that we need to take, especially when it comes down to the mental health situation. I love you even more now, but we need to find out how to help you with the behaviors or with your situation, so that we can help you to be the best version of you in a positive situation, so that you can be proactive and not reactive in life. And those are some of the things that I'm trying to educate, empower not just the youth, but the family
yeah,
about that strength based language, feeding it in, the strength based engagement, helping them to be able to not push away. Don't send your child to their room. Sit down. Let's talk about what's going
mm,
on. Let's try to figure this out. We need to unlearn all of the negative behaviors that we have learned through generational practices of inappropriation of behavior as families.
yes, 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 yes. Like I told y'all, she was a wealth of information. Um, so Michelle, can you tell the audience how they can contact you if they have additional questions or want to know more information about the organization Spectrum Success 911?
Absolutely. So our website is www dot spectrum spectrum success success 911.org. And our Instagram is spectrum success underscore 911, and spectrum success 911, I believe, is our Facebook. And our phone number is 484-424-7730. And my email is shell CHELE at spectrum success 911.org.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Michelle, for coming on and sharing with us. We're definitely going to have you come back because I know my sister is a wealth of information. And so I want to make sure she comes back and talk to the families and listeners of Advocate for Me podcast. So as we always end the show, remember to love up on your child. Remember to take one day at a time, and remember that you're going to go through this journey, but knowing that the journey is going to take your child to the next level and to the next step. And as Michelle talked about today, purpose, just making sure that you're doing what you need to do for your child so that you may instill in them what God had put in them, and using their gift and their purpose. Until next time, peace and blessings. Be safe and be blessed.
Thank
Talk
you
to you
so
soon.
much, Lavon, for having me.
Oh, you're
I
welcome.
love
You're
you so
welcome.
much.
I love you too.